Hello, everyone. Today, I want to talk about relationship mastery through the relationship to ourselves, and not in a bypassy kind of way where I'm saying that you don't need people, but in a very connected kind of way. And I want to share a very practical exercise with you that you can use to play with the ways in which you are disconnected from yourself or from true reality of another person. I think that we are all working in various ways of improving the way that we have choice over where our focus and attention is within the relational field. And as many of you know, a lot of the truths that we come to around what is needed for our own evolution and growth, it's simple. It's something that we know, but when we put it into practice, it's a different experience, because what we come up against is not just, oh, take this one action. It's the unraveling of so much of our conditioning and automatic patterning and ways of being with ourselves and being in relationship. And if we look at that from a generational perspective, there is a lot of energy that is behind those patterns. So it's so important, firstly, that we never lose touch with the context of our individual awakening and the awakening of the collective, because we exist in tandem, truly. So here's the relational exercise. And like I said, I think I said this, you can do this whether somebody is aware of the fact that you are doing this or not. But certainly it's amazing if you can practice this consciously in relationship. So firstly, what I guess I have to pre-map out before I even share the exercise is the three main ways that we sort of automatically go into. And for a lot of us, we move between them. And so we have some type of a lived experience of all three. The first one is losing ourselves through enmeshment with another person. And this is oftentimes coming from a survival mechanism that's set up early in childhood, where you start to dissolve the boundaries of self so that you can be hyper attuned to the needs of the people around you, form a level of empathy that allows you to try to keep yourself safe in that situation. And obviously that can be a fantastic gift in many ways, but it's sort of overdeveloped. And the piece that is missing is oftentimes the stabilization and the anchor within the self. And so if you're struggling with that style, then you may notice that when you're alone, you can really feel yourself. And the minute that you get into contact with something outside of yourself, even like a video like this, you may start to dissociate from your own experience and even start to create some type of an overlay perhaps on what you're interacting with. It's actually a way of avoiding ourselves in a sense. Long term, we can almost create this pathological outpouring into the people around us, and it creates a real war within the being, because at a collective level there is a desire for self-awareness. And so we're going to continue to come up against the pain points of us abandoning our own selves until we continue to reclaim ourselves. So that's one experience, right? Is where we just sort of get absorbed into that other person and we feel enmeshed, and then we lose touch with ourselves. And so part of that experience is first just noticing it, right? And then coming back and seeing if we can anchor within ourselves. But before I go through the whole process, let's get through the three. So that's the first one. The second one is where we become so absorbed into our own experience that we lose touch with the other person, and we lose touch with actually connecting to that other person as they are. and in its most extreme form. I mean, all of these are really narcissistic ways of relating, and this is just the nature of attachment trauma. Sometimes it can come out in malicious ways, right? If we're continuing to disown the aspects of us that really, really are in a lot of pain, and you maybe even want to lash out at us or others because there is all of these types of dynamics happening. But so the second one is being so absorbed into our own world, and a lot of times that involves being so absorbed into the pain body that we're not actually able to properly manage our own emotional experience, and thus it starts to spill out over into the people in our lives and all around us. And it's hard to feel that because oftentimes there's just so much pain and powerlessness within the being that, again, we're disconnected. And so when that's happening, we're really having to first get ourselves, again, stabilized before we can even start to enter into the relational field, because there's almost no room at that point for other people's experiences. There's a real need to actually be met where you are, and that's where the softness and the acceptance comes in around relational mastery and mastering the emotional body and alchemy. But okay, we're going to get to that later. So enmeshed in the other person's experience, so enmeshed in your own experience that you disconnect from their experience. And the third kind of other variation of this dissociative way of being in relationship that so many of us experience and live in and work through is actually being dissociated from our own experience and also being disconnected from the other person's experience. Now, you could sort of say that the first two examples that I gave were also examples of that, but what I mean is that even a detachment from the pain body, it's just a more extreme form of dissociation. And so again, in that case, we're going to have to meet you and meet the person where they are, which is, well, what made you not want to be in the body to begin with? And so we can start to reverse engineer and again, anchor into the self so that we can even do the practice that I am now going to describe for you. So what it is, and meet yourself wherever you are, right? Notice what the automatic pattern is, and notice how it's different with different people, because that will also tell you about mirroring dynamics or energetic dynamics that you're in with different people. But one more thing I just want to say is that if you're somebody who gets very easily absorbed into other people's experience, you will find relationships to be very draining on your system unless they feel like a safe person where your system can actually relax and thus you can sit back into your being. Because it's like you are literally feeling what they are feeling. And that is wired through the pain pathways in the body, whereas compassion, which I've talked about before, is wired through the reward centers. And so it's a different experience of having that more impersonal energy and way of relating, which is really what has to be cultivated. So you come into your center, right? You find and you explore what that is, and then you start to open up to the person in front of you. It would be really great if you could do this consciously with another person. And both of you are tracking and monitoring where the attention is. Are you much more interested in their experience, so much so that you're losing touch with your own? Or are you actually projecting your own internal questions about what you think that they're thinking of you onto them in that moment, and thus in a layer of separation? And you can start to just notice and then continue to bring yourself back to your center and core. And I think what we're really aiming for here through this cultivation practice of pulling ourselves back into our energy, and maybe even experimenting with what it's like to remove ourselves in another layer. Because even stepping back from the whole of the entire conversation can be done in a conscious way that's not dissociative, that stays connected. See, it's limitless what we actually have the ability to do as far as like where we put our focus. But when we're just talking about this very, very simple practice, it's personal energy and meeting, right? We want to meet, not necessarily enmesh, but that is a skill that could come in handy in a lot of different situations, because in order for you, when you feel what somebody else can feel, just like when you can feel what you actually feel, you know what to do. You can take that now as a part of yourself and act on that best interest. And so the other side, right, the impersonal energy, where you're much more seated back in your experience of things, it's a very safe feeling, because when we're in our body, we're connected to discernment. And so it's really about observing, like, how is our being in relationship right now to what's going on, and being able to decipher and discern through that. So notice when you're starting to lose touch with yourself. Notice when you're starting to lose touch with yourself. Notice when you're starting to lose touch with the other person. And then keep playing into the edges of how can I soften into and accept my experience, and also soften into and accept this other person's experience. So I feel like there is this continued heart awakening amongst a lot of us who are stepping into this new tone and frequency, setting the tone for how we want to treat ourselves and how we want to be in relationship to this world and the people around us. And there's a heart opening and there's a softening that if we can allow that, if we can even taste that for ourselves, what happens is it starts to melt away the ways in which we have closed ourselves off from connection. Not to deny it, that's all a part of the process. But we literally energetically calcify ourselves and actually start to block the frequency of love. And so one of the things that I'm asking myself as I continue to challenge my own point of self-responsibility, accountability, and also remaining open-hearted within the relational space, is how can I truly learn to take another person as a part of myself, and not based on my ego, not based of what I believe I should have or need or want, but really be in a space of humility and truly wanting connection, and also knowing myself and knowing what I need and want and value, and being able to advocate for that and learning how to do that more deeply. It's creating this immense capacity for love, real love. And I want to add this, because speaking to a client about this, who is recovering from a relationship with a partner that is severely narcissistic. And when she started to love herself, when she started to choose herself and actually choose to preserve her own nervous system and well-being, what this narcissistic person told her is that you are being selfish and that you're being greedy, you're not being loving. And that is because what that person's idea of an actual understanding of love is so fucked up, that when love actually comes, you think that it's trying to hurt you, because you don't actually know what love is. And sometimes love is being cut off from the ability to harm other people, because that's actually what's in your best and highest interest. And obviously what's in the best interest of the people around you. So many of us also have an inner perpetrator that I feel like the shame of that lives in a petri dish. And the more that we can open up about that and be honest about that, the more we can really just get through it and go, yep, we don't want to suppress it. We don't want to suppress it, because that's what's creating the eighth sphere that Rudolf Steiner talks about. That's what creates the calcification that I was just speaking about, that closes our hearts off. So I want to just say one last little piece here. Two things. One is about pain and suffering, and the other one is about a dream that I had that is connected to all of the things that we're talking about. So pain and suffering. Maybe you guys have heard this before, but we're going to lay it back down again. So, and I want to really, really stay rooted and grounded here, in that I recognize that at a global, societal, and collective level, the suffering that we see is, we have the power as individuals to especially many of us right now who can even consider it and talk about and philosophize about these types of concepts and work up and have the privilege, the leisure in our lives to work upon these things. As individuals, we recognize that pain is an indicator of a misalignment. It's an indicator that there is something that is seeking a new form and something is seeking to die or be transformed. And a lot of what the individual experiences does have to do with a collective and global context. So we cannot discount that, because that's also a part of what we're here to create and set the tone for. And so, as it relates to the individual, what you can do is see, if you're as an individual still in a state of suffering, then it's going to be very hard for you to do anything about the suffering in the world. So what it starts with is you recognizing where the pain is being ignored, where you have hardened even against going towards that pain. Maybe because there's a lack of support, maybe there's really good reasons. But we got to figure out what those reasons are so that you can start to soften towards and accept the experience of what is in your own emotional body, and thus become a softer place for those things to alchemize and move and release through the body and the mind and reorganize. And when we do that, when we're committed to following and knowing that that pain is actually a point of expansion, that there's a healing experience that we're meant to line up with on the other side of that. And this is really going to open up a whole other conversation about the ways in which, when we're stuck in that really, really, really deep pain, we're stuck in that place of feeling like where we are and the healing experience is so far apart. What we have to remember is that trauma likes to do the all or nothing, the black and white thing. And that's not how we're going to change, and that's not how anybody who is even remotely rehabilitated themselves has changed. It's through very small and achievable and incremental shifts in the ways in which you think, the choices that you make, small, and the smaller, the more achievable, the better. Because what it does is it starts to build this magnetic pathway that says, I can do this. Look, I just did that. You just proved to yourself that you're powerful. The second that you make a choice and you do anything that's bringing you slightly towards relief, slightly towards lining up with what the opposite experience is, you're showing yourself that you're a powerful being. And then you start to build on that, and you build on that. Now, literally, it requires humility. This is what I'm really starting to understand, the level of humility that this takes, because we have to look at where we actually are. And a lot of us don't want to admit where we actually are, because what that means is, like, I rolled the yoga mat out and I didn't fucking get on it today. And maybe the next day you do that, and maybe the next day you do that. But you keep looking at that yoga mat. That's still progress. And then you get on the yoga mat, but you don't do the yoga. Okay, but you still did that. And it starts to build. So the more that we do that, the more that we transform these pain points, which are really just things seeking our attention so that we can correct some experience, meet some need, and we stop scapegoating that as if that's the problem, then we become an actual vessel for transforming that suffering within the world, because a lot of it's totally unnecessary. It's just the ignoring of pain points at a collective level. And I know that there's a huge fucking power dynamic, all kinds of crazy power dynamics playing out. And so this is the last piece that I'm going to weave in here about the eighth sphere. In Rudolf Steiner's work, he talks about how the eighth sphere is essentially a collection or an amalgamation of all of the suppressed shadow of every single one of us. And what that is doing at an energetic level is it is seeking a way back in. And do you want to know how you can just know that that exists? Because microcosm, macrocosm. And this takes me into the dream. So sometimes I have dreams about teaching. And a couple nights ago, I was teaching this younger guy in his 20s. And I'm also very acutely aware of the fact that this is another aspect of myself. Whenever I'm teaching in the dream space, it's for me, and it's also for whatever energetic exchange is happening in that moment that probably I'm not even fully cognizant of. But when we go into that space of less resistance, right, we're more open to the field and what is, and that means very positive things that we're suppressing and disowning throughout the day, and also other shadow things. And so in the space, a lot of times when I'm teaching, just to give you a sense of what that feels like, is I will kind of like wake up, I'll start to speak in a somewhat unconscious, conscious state. I'll speak what I'm saying, and then I'll go back into the dream space. And it's sort of, the way that I see it psychically is like weaving between my subconscious, my unconscious, and the conscious, and bringing these things in so that I can crystallize it for myself and really remember. I think that's also why I'm saying it, because sometimes these things can be so fleeting. And so what we were working on was emotional suppression. And when I was looking at his field, it was this, and I've actually seen this recently in a couple different people as well, psychically, when I was working with them. So I thought this was very interesting that I was also seeing it in the dream space. And it was this plaque, is the only way I can describe it, plaque, on the outside of the energy body. And it was sort of like this emotional black hole that was this chasm, this split, and it was creating all these protection mechanisms, right? So in a very 3D sense, what I'm talking about is the conditioning, the behaviors, the thoughts, the beliefs that we hold about ourselves. And that was sort of like forming this need to shield and protect the being. And what I was seeing and what we were talking about and what was happening within the energy exchange was to begin to soften towards the experience and towards whatever is this massive separation wound is. Because so often we're actually hardening against that. And what it does is it creates this collapse within the field. And then that calcification and hardening, literally even at a musculature and a cellular level. And so we were working to sort of like reverse engineer that by literally softening in from an internal place towards that separation. And the act of that alone started to create a bit of relief and a bit of reconnection. And so the field will literally start to like flip back into this natural toroidal expression where the energy, the chi, right, is circulating and coming back online. And that can be experienced in a variety of different ways. I was just working with someone the other day, and that was coming through in tingles through the face, the literal tissues coming back alive. So yeah, the last thing I'll say to really like bring it full circle is these are simple things, truths that many of us know, but the actual practice of it, of embodying, of coming home, of honoring ourselves, of getting to know ourselves, of reconnecting, and then acting on that, whatever we discovered within ourselves that we need or who we are, and then right, doing something about that in the world. It is no small feat. And yet, as I've said before, we can do hard things. So I hope that this inspires you. I hope it inspires you. I tried to record this a couple different times. I'm so glad that we did a live format. Okay. Bye-bye.